Welcome, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Karthik, for the kind introduction. And at the outset, I'd like to thank everyone at J&J and especially FECO Shala for this program. So I'll just start sharing my screen.
Yes, yes, sir. Desktop screen. Yes, we can see the screen.
Yeah. Wonderful. So, I was asked to talk about the Signature Pro and the advantages that we get with the Signature Pro and how we can use it. So I have been using this machine for the last 5.5 years now, and I've found it very comfortable. And the initial set of slides, maybe about 10 or 12 slides, will be slides given to me by J&J. While I've understood those slides and I agree with the content in those slides, I have not changed a single word in any of those slides. But subsequent to those slides will be a series of cases which I'd like to show, which shows the array of kind of cases which we can do with ease with the Signature Pro. I know it's a very small and closed group, unlike most webinars, and I think that's where this web show really has its advantage. So please feel free to stop me at any time, and we can discuss any point pertaining to that particular video which is being shown, or any particular step that you would like to discuss. So shall I go ahead?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please.
Yeah, please. Okay. So essentially, with the Signature Pro, the advantages that we get is the Ellipse FS technology, which was already available earlier in the Signature as well. But the Fluidics, which has also seen great enhancement in the Fluidics, which is the on-demand and the Fusion Fluidics, and I'll cover it quickly. So with the Ellipse technology is the advantage of the enhanced cutting efficiency, because the FECO tip has a continuous tip movement both in the longitudinal as well as in the transverse or the elliptical direction, thereby helping real low energy lens removal, reducing effective FECO time. And this elliptical cutting also helps in reducing the amount of clogging that you have because of its superior cutting efficiency, even when you are phacoing hard cataracts. And this I'll demonstrate in some of the videos subsequently. Probably one of the best advantages of the Signature Pro, and what is really unique to the Signature Pro, is the availability of on-demand fluidics. What on-demand fluidics means is the ability to switch between one type of pump, that is the peristaltic pump, to the Venturi pump on the fly as and when we choose, depending on the stage of surgery that we are doing, is, I think, a major advantage which the Signature Pro has. Traditionally, for a number of surgeons, including me, who have come from peristaltic-based equipments, it's a fairly big change to suddenly jump into a completely Venturi-based equipment. And this is a place, or this is a platform where the Signature Pro allows you to use both the advantages of both the peristaltic and Venturi in equal measure. So essentially, you'd want to use the peristaltic when you want a greater hold, when you're initially, when you're doing the sculpting and when you're doing the chopping or cracking techniques. That is when you're more likely to use your peristaltic pumps. And in the early quad as well, your peristaltic continues to help. But as we move along in the later part of quadrant removal, in epinucleus, cortex, and IA and OVD removal, that is when the Venturi pump can kick in. And you have the ability to switch it on and off on the fly, and that really enhances the efficiency. So like I said earlier, when you want greater control, high vacuum with a lower flow, where you want to hold a larger lens fragments when you're actually doing your sculpting or chopping techniques, and initial part of quadrant removal when you may have slightly larger pieces present, that is when the peristaltic pumps gives you good chamber stability and good control, at the same time allowing you to do all your chopping maneuvers. But later, in the later half of the surgery, you can switch on to the Venturi pump, which gives you real low energy lens extraction, with greater flow. There is greater followability and increase in efficiency altogether, where you're really able to remove the pieces with minimal phaco energy and phaco time. So you can choose which you want, and you can keep optimizing as you go on. I've only recently started using Venturi even for quadrant removal. Earlier, I was just using it for epinucleus and cortex and visco washes. But nowadays, even for quadrant removal, Venturi is working extremely well. The third advantage which I want to talk about is the excellent chamber stability that the Signature Pro gives. And that is really to do with this excellent continuous or excellent IOP monitoring, proactive monitoring which takes place. And this helps you in adjusting and mitigating with the help of the settings which I'll show in subsequent slides to preserve the IOP throughout your extraction and reduce the post-occlusion surge. So this automatic occlusion sensing technology or the case technology, which is what I've been used to saying. So what it really does is that it keeps sensing the occlusion time. So essentially you can alter your settings. That is when you're going in for a full occlusion and when the highest peak of vacuum is reached. Now, if there is a sudden break in the occlusion, then there is a sudden steep drop in IOP, which is subsequently what causes the surge. And for this surge prevention, you have the automatic occlusion sensing technology, which is essentially like I'm showing in my settings here. In your unoccluded, you can have 500, 550 going up to 650. But after about 20 milliseconds of the maximum peak occlusion being achieved, it drops to a preset level of 426. So this is essentially allowing you to get a good hold. And once a good hold is achieved after 20 milliseconds, it drops to a middle level of a safer preset level of about 420, as in this case, as you can see. And therefore, when the occlusion breaks, you don't have any sudden surge and there is no excess fluid which is drawn into the phaco tip, which actually leads to the surge. Again, I'll depict in this picture. So you have the vacuum slowly building up, you have the uptime. And once the peak vacuum is there for 20 milliseconds, it automatically leads to a safe landing. So when the occlusion breaks at this point, you're not breaking here, but instead you're breaking at a much lower and safer level. And therefore, the amount of fluid which is evacuated from the anterior chamber is much lesser and much more gradual, giving you excellent chamber stability. Just a pictorial depiction of what happens when you don't have this drop. When you're using fusion fluidics, this is how gradual and slow the intraocular pressure drop is. But whereas when you have the occlusion break at this point with the full occlusion, it drops suddenly to this level. So you can see that this is the volume of fluid which you are actually saving by using this fusion fluidics. If not for this fusion fluidics, you would actually be dropping to this level, and this amount of excess volume from the anterior chamber would be removed, and which could then result in surge. So this case technology or the automatic occlusion sensing technology has really helped in improving and providing a great chamber stability and stepping down your vacuum before the occlusion breaks. So that is my theoretical part of the talk. And now I'll take you all through a series of few videos which I have put together. A couple of hard cataracts, an intumescent cataract, small pupil, a slightly floppy iris, PXF. All these have been put together so that we can discuss different situations and what techniques we're using in each of them. Let me at this moment say that while earlier I had different settings for different grades of cataract and different situations, nowadays, more or less, I have almost switched over to having a uniform setting for almost all grades of cataracts. The initial two videos is a hard cataract, brown, black cataract. Later, I'll even show a very soft cataract, but it is more or less a very, very similar setting pattern. And it is actually testament to the quality of the machine that with a similar energy setting and similar linear vacuum, you're actually able to maintain the same speed and stability in almost all grades of cataract. So let us just start off with this relatively dense brown nucleus. So this was a patient who also wanted a toric multifocal lens. So this is the initial marking going in. So for these hard cataracts, I do use Trypan Blue because the red glow is not very good. And generally, a normal viscoelastic is sufficient. In these cases, you don't necessarily need a high molecular weight viscoelastic. Later parts with a very hard cataract, you can use something like a visco to reduce the amount of damage to the endothelium. With regards to the rexus, I like to have a moderately sized rexus, definitely not small. Either at the same time, you don't want it to be too large as well. The advantage of of having an adequate rexus is that even in case one of your chops are not adequate, has not gone all the way through, and you're taking a slightly larger piece out, this sufficiently sized rexus allows you to maneuver the piece into the anterior chamber. But at the same time, you don't want such a large rexus that there is not a uniform overlap of the intraocular lens, especially in toric and multifocal lenses. Hydrodissection has to be gentle. I generally prefer a multi-quadrant hydrodissection so that I can have a freely mobile lens. This is a step which I would do again and again, even before I proceed with the surgery, because if I don't get a freely mobile lens, I will not proceed. Because not having a freely mobile lens can make the difference between a very smooth and a surgery which can lead into disaster and zonular dialysis, as you don't want to do these hard cataracts with the least amount of stress to the zonules. So I initially start off with a trench, and I do a slightly deeper trench in these hard cataracts. And this trench is essentially to give you two advantages. One, it's to debulk the central core, and it is also to provide you the enough space that you want when you're doing your subsequent chopping maneuvers. So now, after making a central deep crater, I am now going into a full occlusion and going ahead with my direct chop. So as you can see here, I'm proceeding towards the edge of the nucleus with a full occlusion at around 500, 550 vacuum, and then dividing the piece all the way across, right up to the center, cracking the spine. If it is only midway through, now you may not want to stretch the nucleus too hard in these cases. So you rotate it by 180 degrees all the way to the other side, and then complete the entire crack so that it goes from one end to the other, and you have the central spine which needs to break. So you may not be able to do it in one go. You might want to gradually go in deeper and deeper as you're doing the subsequent chops, what we call multi-level chopping. You may not achieve it in one go, though in this particular case, it is happening more or less in the first chop itself. I'll show you in the subsequent video where it doesn't happen in a single step, and you are having to go deeper and deeper into a second or third level to ensure the piece is completely separated. Some surgeons do advocate removing and emulsifying the initial piece and then creating space in the bag. One thing I would guard against is to not make the bag too empty. I would rather have the bag relatively full with the nucleus, because then the nucleus does not tilt and your subsequent emulsification becomes easier, your subsequent chopping rather becomes easier. And then once you have completely separate pieces, the emulsification is exceedingly easy. So I'll demonstrate this more with a subsequent technique. This is just the cortex aspiration and the toric multifocal lens going in place. And needless to say, with these lenses, once it is placed and well centered in the bag and is aligned into position, I just leave it a few degrees short of the final intended desired axis. I then go ahead and do a complete visco wash, do a visco removal from beneath the lens as well. And then subsequently, with the irrigation cannula still in, I remove the aspiration once after having centered and tapped the lens in place. With it still on, you hydrate the port and then remove this cannula. This ensures there's no sudden shallowing of the AC so that the IOL does not rotate and it is well centered and is on axis as you would desire. So this is a brown cataract with a toric lens. We'll move ahead with a black cataract, where essentially some of the earlier techniques which I had mentioned are useful, but I'll use this video particularly to elucidate the multi-level chopping which I was talking about earlier. So this is the rexus just happening. I'm just like to highlight again, having a slightly larger rexus in these cases would help, maybe around 5.5 millimeter or so that you have you can place the IOL in the bag at the same time, go ahead and do a good phacoemulsification. A good incision always helps to ensure you don't have any wound burn or wound leak. The incision should neither be too short nor too long in these cases. Once the lens is very mobile, as you can see here, it's a black dense cataract. And I don't generally increase my power beyond 70. I don't go up to 100 or anything. I just keep it at a max of 70. The bottle height, as you can see here, because of our OT setup, generally does not go beyond 70 or 75. And after making that central crater, you can see here I'm making the direct central chop to ensure that it divides in the center. And then rotate it by 180 degrees, We're literally revising the steps which we saw in the previous video, but there's a slightly more denser cataract, more leathery cataract, and therefore it may not come in one go. So as you can see here, with each subsequent chop, I'm going deeper and deeper. I'll go ahead, occlude, separate the anterior fibers to about 50-70%, then go ahead deeper, hold again deeper, and ensure that I separate it. And once it's separated into multiple pieces is when I emulsify. As you can see here, this is that emulsification which I showed just now was actually happening in real time. It's not an edited video. The efficiency of the machine is such. Sorry, the video is. The efficiency of the machine is such that for some reason it stopped playing. I'll just, yeah. The efficiency of the machine is such that you're actually able to evacuate the pieces with great efficiency and great speed. For some reason, this video is getting stuck, but anyway, so it's efficiency of the machine is such that you're able to remove even these hard pieces very efficiently. And even in the last piece, unfortunately, the last bit of the video is somehow it's stuck. It's not playing. But I wanted to demonstrate that even when it comes to the last piece in these hard cataracts, there is almost no need to switch your settings. I never use the epinuclear mode. I just go ahead with the quadrant mode itself. And with just very minimal manipulation of your foot pedal, you're actually able to do it. And that is the kind of chamber stability that this machine gives you. And with a high vacuum of even a 600, which we're using in this particular case, and aspiration flow rate, which is as high as 40, 42, you're still able to go ahead and do a very smooth phacoemulsification. So those were two cases with hard cataracts. Now this is a moderate cataract, but the challenge here is because of the extensive PXF, there is extremely weak and loose zonules. So I'll show here when I'm trying to initiate my phacoemulsification, you can see that the entire nucleus is moving around, and even initiating my rhexis is quite a challenge. Now in these cases, you're better off using a forceps. Just to start off with the initial small rhexis, I've made it with the cystitome itself. But after making a small rhexis, I would now need to enlarge it and make a larger rhexis with a forceps, because with these loose zonules and mobile lenses, you'll never be able to make a sufficiently sized rhexis with your cystitome. So this is an initial rhexis happening with your forceps after the initial nick. And then after making this double rhexis, I realized that it is still not sufficient to place my capsule hooks along one quadrant. So I make one more nick and use the left hand to enlarge the rhexis in that direction, so that now I have a sufficiently sized, centered, about 4.5 to 5 millimeter rhexis. I have to do, before I proceed with the surgery further, I have to do adequate hydro, but I will not do any rotation, because the rotation of the nucleus can cause weakening of the zonules. Now it is at this stage that you insert your capsule hooks, because now you have to understand that this is not a focal zonulopathy like you have in traumatic cataracts, and it is a kind of a diffuse zonulopathy. So in these diffuse zonulopathies with PXF, as you go on with the cataract surgery, the zonules tend to become weaker and progressively weaker with your manipulation. So stabilizing the capsular bag initially with capsule hooks, which are equidistantly placed, as you can see here, in your main 4 areas. Keep the area where you're going to do your area of chopping a little free, so that it doesn't get entangled with your instrument, and you are able to go ahead and move ahead with your chopping. So once these capsule hooks are in place, you can actually go ahead and do your chopping techniques. And these are then a standard direct chop, which I'm using in this. And once the pieces are separated, you can start removing them. But once you start removing the pieces, you have to be extremely cautious, because now it's only the anterior capsule which is supported, but the posterior capsule can keep coming up again and again in these kind of weak bags. So as the dictum always states, wait for as long as you can till you can place a CTR, but as early as you must. So once I've evacuated a first initial couple of pieces, I go ahead and place the CTR in place. Now that I have adequate support and the bag is nicely pushed back, the CTR is now being, the second piece is being tucked in, and now I'm able to rotate the nucleus with greater ease, and then go ahead and do the entire phacoemulsification with no fear whatsoever. Now, this is a situation where it greatly helps to have these hooks and CTR combination in these kind of weak bags, and the excellent chamber stability, like I alluded to in my earlier cases, ensures that I can do a safe phaco, safe central phaco in this kind of situation as well. Even in the last stages, as you can see here, the chamber stability is very good. Cortex aspiration can be a little difficult after the once the CTR is placed, but you can always go ahead and tease it from under the flanges and remove it. I place a 3-piece lens for additional measure, and once it is in place, I then go ahead and remove the capsular tension rings, and then you can reassess the centration of the IOL. Like I said earlier, in these kind of diffuse zonulopathies where the zonules are diffusely weak, it is the manipulation during surgery which you need to be most careful with. And at the end of surgery, you see a very well-centered lens and a well-centered rhexis. And therefore, no additional maneuver is required at this stage. Again, there is a very good likelihood that this cataract surgery will last the lifetime of the patient. But there are rare cases with these progressive PXF, the entire lens bag complex can dislocate. And in those cases, having placed a 3-piece lens, I can directly convert it into an SFIOL which is tucked intrasclerally using any of the techniques like a glued IOL or a Yamane technique, which is more preferred nowadays. I'll then move on to a simple case with a floppy iris. It's a relatively soft cataract. Now, this was not a patient where I was expecting a floppy iris, where there was no previous history of Uromax or the tamsulosin usage, and where I had proceeded normally like a regular case under topical anesthesia. And when I do the hydrodissection is when I see that the iris is now flopping in place. Now, one thing I'd like to highlight here is that the most common time when you get the iris coming out seems to be some crosstalk. If you can mute yourself. Yeah, thank you. Can I continue? Yeah. So it is at the stage of hydrodissection when you can have the highest incidence of the iris prolapsing out. Now, at this stage, once the iris prolapses out, there is a natural tendency for all of us to either push in viscoelastic or push in the iris from the central wound, from the main wound itself. It is very important that in these floppy iris, we understand that the iris is floppy or coming out purely when there is increased IOP inside the eye, pushing the iris out towards one of the wounds. So it's important that we keep the eye soft during the entire procedure. And the iris is now being reposited from a side port using iris spatula. I then push in a little bit of viscoelastic, which is again a mistake. You can see it is prolapsing again. Now I push it again. I've selected this video essentially to show that it is important that you don't push in any viscoelastic subsequently. Take in your second instrument to ensure that you can tuck away the iris when you're taking in the phaco probe and then go ahead with the phaco surgery itself. So now I'm able to proceed with the phacoemulsification. It's important that you keep your phaco probe in the center, don't move towards the iris itself, and the external followability of the machine will ensure that the pieces come to you automatically. And even those subincisional pieces which may not necessarily come in, just dial it towards the phaco tip and go ahead with the case. After that, it's a fairly simple, straightforward cortex aspiration and placement. Just one point I wanted to highlight is not to push in any viscoelastic, keep the eye soft, and then go ahead. Don't remove the phaco probe unnecessarily. Keep the phaco probe within the eye. Even if you need to push in any viscoelastic, you can always do it from a side port which you're using for your second instrument, and try to complete the phaco in one go. This ensures that the pupil doesn't come down too much and you're able to go ahead with the case without any discomfort. This is a case where the patient was already on tamsulosin, where I knew the patient is on tamsulosin. You can see some of the patches of iris atrophy along with pseudo exfoliation, where you do expect a floppy iris. And when a floppy iris associated with a small pupil is a greater risk factor. So in the initial stage itself, I go ahead and place the iris hooks. And as you can see, there's a significant amount of pseudo exfoliation as well. And then I like to do a slightly more anterior incision in these places. And I like to place a hook just near the incision so that the iris does not come. You can either place it subincisionally or just subadjacent to the incision so that it doesn't come in the way of your phaco probe. And then you go ahead and do your phaco chop techniques as usual. Again, fortunately, in this case, the bag is not weak, it's not mobile. So I can go ahead. I don't need to use any capsular hooks or capsular tension rings. Even though there was significant PXF, the bag is quite stable. And you can go ahead with your regular phaco techniques once the pupil has been enlarged sufficiently. You can again sub-chop, as you can see here, even in the harder cataracts as well as the softer cataracts. Even if you've made your initial direct chops, if a piece is particularly large, you can at any point of time just hold it and sub-chop it and then go ahead with your phacoemulsification. Again, as you can see here, the parameters going up to 500, 550 vacuum, and still the chamber is exceedingly stable. Now, while we talk about hard cataracts, soft cataract is probably what we face most commonly. And soft cataract presents its unique challenge. Essentially, in soft cataract, the central nucleus is almost absent or is present to a very small extent, and it is a precious commodity. So you don't want to eat away the nucleus and be left with a bowl, which makes it quite difficult to remove the cataract. So I like to do in these cases a hydrodissection combined with a hydrodelineation. And doing a hydrodelineation enables you to remove the nucleus even if the chops are not completely present or not completely adequate. And as you can see here, I'm using absolutely zero power, and all these chops are happening with just a high degree of vacuum. You can hold the nucleus with the high vacuum of 500, 550, which is the usual setting, and then there's hardly any power which is being taken when you're occluding. I'll just go back there for the initial chops. As you can see here, there is no occlusion itself, and the piece is being drawn with just vacuum. There is absolutely no power which is being used. If any power is used, it will immediately eat away that nucleus, and you'll be left with no central core whatsoever to complete your chops. And because the hydrodelineation has also been done, these pieces come out very easily with no effort, and you can see the peripheral epinuclear sheet which is left behind, which can then be removed subsequently in a single attempt, and that makes it extremely easy and predictable way of doing the entire procedure. And you can see here the epinucleus is now coming out as a single ball, and it can be teased into the phaco tip. And in the same settings, in the same quadrant settings itself, you can proceed with the entire case. This is the last video that I have, one of intumescent cataract. With an intumescent cataract, the phaco itself is not much of a challenge. It's really the rhexis. So my usual go-to technique is to make an initial small rhexis after using a high molecular weight viscoelastic. I then aspirate or do even a gentle hydrodissection and remove the entire fluffy cortex in these intumescent cataracts. Intumescent cataract itself can be of two types. One where you make a nick and the fluid comes out. In those cases, it's actually the tendency for the rhexis to run off is actually quite less. But it is these hydrated cortical fibers where the tendency for the rhexis to run off is more. And in those cases, repeatably do an initial small rhexis, do aspiration, remove the hydrated cortical fibers, and then you can go ahead and do a double rhexis. Once a double rhexis is made, the standard chop techniques can be used. Most of these cataracts usually are quite soft, and removing the cataract is generally not a challenge. You can use the same techniques. Yes, we must remember that these patients may not have much of an epinuclear bowl, and you need to be a little bit more careful when you're doing the phaco aspiration or the phaco emulsification. And but again, the good chamber stability allows you to keep the probe bang in the center, not moving the probe at all, and the pieces just come to you automatically. Even my second instrument is hardly moved during the entire case, and it's just the pieces came to the probe because of the good followability that the machine gives you. So the WhiteStar, just to sum up the advantages of the Signature Pro over the previous Signature system, it has a faster processor. The vacuum building is 5 times faster than the previous Signature. It has a higher sampling rate, and therefore your the fusion fluidics, which I spoke about earlier, really comes into play. You have a wireless and a very ergonomic foot pedal, making it extremely easy. And importantly, you also have a smaller bore tubing, which really also gives you the advantage of a lower post-occlusion surge. You also have this advantage of this CASA technology. Quite frankly, this is something which even I haven't used to the full extent, where you do the cataract analysis and settings application, where you're able to get in a lot of data, which can be wirelessly taken from your system. The way you're using your settings can be intuitively assessed with the performance charts, and you can go on and improve your settings as you and optimize your settings as you go on. So it gives you a wireless mechanism to connect and visualize your performance and go ahead, analyze your data and optimize your settings as well. So thank you so much for your attention. I think I'll stop sharing and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, sir, for this very informative session and presentation and videos also. Maybe you can stop sharing the presentation, sir.
I think I've stopped sharing.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
So there are few questions in the chat box, sir. And first question is by Dr. Dania, sir. Request Dr. Dania to kindly unmute and go ahead with the question, please.
So do you want me to ask? This is Danya here.
Yes, please, ma'am. Yes, please, ma'am.
So I've had cases of floppy iris wherein I realized only after hydro dissection as you faced. So what is your take on using iris hooks later? I've had one failed attempt and 2-3 successful attempts.
Yeah. So I would definitely not hesitate to use iris hooks if at any point of time I feel the phaco is not safe. That is, let's say, despite your best attempts to not touch the iris, the pupil is coming down, shrinking, you've not completed your chops, and removing your cataract is going to be difficult, visibility is poor. At any point of time, please stop and go ahead with your iris hooks. Even if it is being done under topical anesthesia, you can just instill a little amount of intracameral xylocaine. My only small tip will be to not inflate the bag with too much with viscoelastic, the anterior chamber too much with viscoelastic. Put in just a minimal amount of visco so that you have enough space to put in your hooks. Because once you inflate, the iris again will start coming to the main wound, will start coming to your side port, and it'll be quite difficult for you to put your iris hooks accurately. So reposit the iris towards the center, just put in a little bit of viscoelastic, and then go ahead and remove and put in your iris hooks. While you're putting in an iris hook, just be a little careful not to engage the anterior lip of your capsulorhexis. Even if you do, actually there is no problem. Frankly, there have been times, though I showed the classical capsule hooks in this case, I have used iris hooks also as capsule hooks and done such cases. So yes, it's not advisable, and it is not a case that I will show when I'm in a webinar like this, but it can be done. And so it's not like if you have engaged a capsule, it's going to get torn. You can always disengage it and then ensure you catch the iris. Yes, in other cases, you could go in, put in a little bit of viscoelastic, create a little bit of space between the capsule and the iris to engage the only the iris. But in floppy iris, it's actually very difficult to engage the capsule. You will engage only the iris because the iris tends to come up very easily. And once you're taking in the iris hook, you will take in only the iris. And go ahead, place the iris hooks, and then continue with the phacoemulsification. I showed that more to say that don't inflate the bag, and identifying it early is very, very important. So as soon as you do the hydro, if there is a tendency for the iris to come, please stop, don't progress with the hydro, come out with the from the side port, reposit the iris, and then put in a little bit of viscoelastic. If necessary, you can even do a minimal amount of hydro dissection from the side port if you feel your initial hydro dissection was not sufficient, because from the side port, the amount of fluid egressing is not going to be much. And then you can go ahead with the case.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Request surgeons to kindly unmute and go ahead with the questions, please.
You'll have to call it out, Karthik. Yeah.
Yes, sir. There is a question in the chat box, sir, by Dr. Prashant. I'll be asking on behalf of Dr. Prashant, sir. How is the post-occlusion surge in peristaltic mode in Whitestar Signature Pro?
That's what like I said, unfortunately, actually, you know, that black cataract, the second half of the black cataract was purely to show the emulsification. It's unfortunate that it didn't run that particular video alone. But actually, the surge is so minimal that it is, while I did speak about it a lot during this presentation, it's not something that I keenly focus on or keep looking at during the surgery. Because even in these harder cataracts and using fairly high parameters, the chamber stability is excellent. There's hardly any surge, and you're able to do a very safe phacoemulsification in the center. Is really not much need to change your settings in this machine.
Next question is by Dr. Prashant again, sir. Balance tip or torsional versus ellipse FX handpiece in hard cataracts. What is your choice?
I'm somehow more because I'm using this more often. I'm very comfortable with the ellipse FX. We have the Centurion as well, and I use the balance tip also. I don't necessarily see a significant difference as far as the tip is concerned. In fact, you can use the balance tip in Infinity and you will get nearly the same results as you get with the Centurion. So probably with Centurion compared to Infinity is just that the stability is a little better at even a lower IOP or a lower bottle height. That might be the only advantage of the Centurion over the Infinity. But other than that, it doesn't matter. Definitely, yes, a balance tip gives you an advantage over the regular tips which we were using with the Infinity and Centurion. And with the ellipse, actually, there is absolutely no problem as well. Ellipse as such, it's more than the tip. It's the way the phaco delivery. So it's just instead of torsional, we are calling it elliptical here. Whether there is a actual difference, only the J&J people have to tell you.
Next question is by Dr. Prashant again. In floppy iris management, what is your choice, iris hooks versus pupil expanding rings?
I prefer using iris hooks. The reason is if the pupil is small enough, your pupil expansion devices also work. But sometimes in these where the pupil can, with a higher, when you're going in with a higher bottle height or a higher IOP, when it tends to expand, occasionally one of the eyelets of the pupil expansion ring tends to disengage. And I've had it happening a couple of times when I have to repeatedly had to engage the one of the eyelets of the capsule hooks. Eyelets of the pupil expansion ring. So I prefer using iris hooks for a floppy iris. For a small pupil, it probably doesn't matter. Both work equally well.
Thank you, sir. Request Dr. Danya to kindly unmute again and go ahead with your question, please.
Yes, sir. So what is the bottle height that you use normally?
I think, there's no harm in using a high bottle height. Frankly, it's purely our comfort. And while in Centurion, we are operating with 30, 35 and 40 millimeters of mercury pressure, I don't see any advantage whatsoever. So I generally tell all surgeons or our fellows, whoever we are discussing with, that you can place the bottle height at your convenience. It's really important that you're comfortable with your settings. Usually I keep it around 65 or 70. And frankly, I'm not able to keep it more than 75 because of the height of our OT ceiling. So other than that, if your OT ceiling allows you to keep it 85, 90, you can keep it. Probably keep it a little lower when you have a slightly weak bag or high myopia. You want to slightly lower your bottle so that you're not causing excessive stretch for these patients and they can have a little bit of pain despite using intracameral xylocaine. So in those cases, consciously we can bring our bottle height down.
Okay, I have had the experience of using the older version. In that, the bottle height was 78. As you told, we had the same constraint of the height of the theater.
Signature is a taller machine.
Yeah. So I used to operate with vacuum 380 and aspiration 36. With that, there'll be a lot of surge, AC fluctuation, even when removing the first piece.
Mhm.
So other
Was
surgeons they
it
tend
with
to keep it,
reused tubings or fresh tubings?
those are reused.
Yeah. So that
Not
the
this-
problem is not with the machine; it's with the tubings. So it's with the, because the earlier signature had reusable tubings, and most of us used reusable tubings, and the compliance of the tubing changes, and therefore that is the reason for surge. Otherwise, if your surge is happening when you're removing your first piece, definitely there is some other issue.
It is
Even with a
some AC fluctuation, some
AC
visible
fluctuation,
fluctuation.
correct. Visible AC fluctuation, which later results in surge when you're removing your pieces, is essentially because of tubing or your aspiration, I mean, or your irrigation flow not being good, some occlusion, some air bubble being caught in the bottle. So all those things are the reasons. It's seldom to do with the machine itself. You don't even have to use a high-end machine like Signature Pro. Any of the machine, even compact, even intuitive, they almost never have AC fluctuations in the initial period. Maybe a little bit of fluctuation towards the end, but definitely if it's the initial period, it's more to do with the tubings.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anya, for the questions. We have a question by Dr. Ravish, sir. Request Dr. Ravish to kindly unmute and go ahead with the questions, please. Or maybe I'll ask on behalf of sir. Hello, sir. Very informative presentation. I would like to know what is your take on doing a 4-quadrant technique for a hard cataract on White Star Signature Pro, or you prefer doing a direct chop after initial debulking?
Like I said, I prefer doing the direct chop, primarily because the chop is one of the least stressful ways of doing the cracking the hard nucleus. Yes, you want to debulk. I completely agree with that. And whether you do it as a single trench or two trenches, there's no argument there. Maybe a two trench would help. Yes, you're using more phaco energy in two trenches, but then again, the energy is away from the endothelium, so that's not really a major factor. But when it comes to dividing the nucleus, if you're using two instruments to go in and push and separate the nucleus, generally the amount of downward and lateral force is a little bit more when you're, let's say, using your Sinskey and your phaco probe, or your chopper and your Sinskey, the two instruments, and trying to separate. It definitely adds to the stress, because to separate those posterior fibers, those leathery fibers, it takes a greater amount of force. Whereas with the chopping technique, because of the way the chopping happens, because it's the phaco probe is holding the nucleus along one side, and you're separating the piece from the opposite direction, the force extended on the peripheral zonules is very less. Most of the force is centripetal and not centrifugal. And because it's a centripetal force, the stress on the zonules is lesser and it is much safer. The last thing that you want is to have a zonular dialysis with a hard cataract, because that is the most difficult situation to deal with, and generally the surgery becomes messy. So I prefer doing this direct chop technique after doing the initial trench.
Thank you, sir.
Please go ahead.
Next question is by Dr. Megha. Request Dr. Megha to kindly unmute and go ahead with the question, please. Okay, I'll ask on behalf of Dr. Megha, sir. Please suggest parameter setting for hard grades.
Parameter settings, as in you mean like what like I said earlier, I am using a very standard parameter setting for almost all grades of cataract. I would generally suggest having a slightly higher vacuum of at least around you could begin with 400 450, then take it up to 500 550. And power, generally, though some people say I have a very hard cataract and I will take it up to 100, that never helps. Please don't increase the power unnecessarily. Keep the power, the maximum of 70 is more than enough. Even for black cataracts, that's like I said, like I showed in that, once you've chopped it sufficiently, and essentially the power is to do with the emulsification. So when you're doing, once it's chopped sufficiently, even at 60, 70 power, the black cataract will go in like an NS2 or NS3. So it goes in very fast and there is absolutely no problem. And with regards to aspiration flow rate, please keep whatever is comfortable, whatever speed you'd like for your evacuation. I keep it at around 36, 38, but even up to 40 is fine, but generally not beyond that.
Thank you, sir. When taking on to this point consideration, when it comes to the parameter setting, and there are few surgeons who want to transition from divide and conquer into the stop and chop or direct chop techniques. Now, what are the points that you would suggest for the transition from direct divide and conquer to chop technique, and how to keep that consistency level, like keeping the chopping level consistent? Sometimes they tend to fluctuate up and down. That's what.
Correct. So it's natural, happens for all of us initially. I think most important is that you're using both hands in tandem rather than when in your divide and conquer, you're mostly using one hand at a time. And in chopping techniques, you're having to use both hands in tandem. Once you feel you've achieved sufficient foot pedal control and you know when you're in 3 and when you're coming back to 2, I think that is the only thing you need to learn for chopping. Because once you go in with a small burst of 3, come back to 2, you have a good hold. And if you're starting earlier with moderate settings like 300, 350 vacuum, you'll have a lot of time before the hold goes away. So if there is sufficient hold of the nucleus, then take the second instrument forward. And whether you're doing a vertical chop or a horizontal chop, go towards the rhexis margin and then initiate your chop. It is having that hold and consistency of hold which is more important. The chop, even if it is not very good, in the softer grades of cataract, even if it is not extremely accurate, your direction of your chop, it will still separate into 2 pieces. And I would really urge all surgeons, even when you're doing divide and conquer, to start with a chopper in your left hand. Because a lot of us start with a Sinskey in the left hand, and then it becomes a mind block to shift from a Sinskey to a chopper. Actually, there is absolutely no problem in using a chopper. It is very, very rare that you will engage the anterior capsule or tear the anterior capsule with your chopper. It really doesn't happen so easily. So we don't have to necessarily fear that. Please continue using a chopper. Hold is very important. And like I said, don't make too wide a trench when you're doing stop and chop for a moderate cataract, because that kind of eats away the nucleus. So make a narrow, deep trench, divide into 2, and then you can go ahead and do your chopper.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for this one. We have a question by Dr. Vamshi, sir. Request Dr. Vamshi to kindly unmute and go ahead with the question, please.
Suyash, that was an excellent presentation.
Thank you, sir.
And I just want to share your tips regarding CTR. At what stage would you like to implant a CTR? And the most tricky part is doing the cortical wash with the CTR on. So
correct, sir.
Yeah.
Correct, sir. So like I said, even during the presentation, as late as you possibly can and as early as you must. So if you are able to continue the case safely till your IA is complete, then putting in the CTR after IA is probably the easiest, both for your removal of your epinucleus and cortex and all is obviously easier without the CTR in place. But having said that, if there is a risk to either with the PC flopping up or the bag moving towards the phaco probe, and you don't, and it's exceedingly important that your rhexis remains intact and you don't damage zonules further. Like in that particular case, after removing 2 pieces, when I was going to take the 3rd piece, the bag kept flopping towards the phaco probe. That is because of the weaker posterior zonules and the redundancy, it is moving up. So in that case, I put in viscoelastic and did pushed in the CTR. That enables the PC to go back, it falls back, you have a stable bag and you can do the phaco safely. That is primary. Now, if you have done an initial good hydrodissection, like I showed there, now there are some surgeons who might say, don't use capsule hooks, do CTR instead. I don't think capsule hooks and CTR are supplementary to, I mean, it's not like choosing one over the other. They are actually complementary. So if you use initially capsule hooks and do a good hydrodissection, then the cortical cleaving hydrodissection, the cortex is reasonably separated. Then it starts coming out. Yes, it's a little bit more struggle than a regular case, but you can still remove the IA. If there is a small epinuclear plate left in, you can go in along the posterior aspect, slightly gently lift up the piece, and then go ahead and aspirate it also.
Fine.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for the question. Thank you, Dr. Shreyas, for the answer. Request all the surgeons to kindly unmute and go ahead with the questions, please.
Good evening, sir. What precaution you take while doing REX?
I'm sorry, madam. I don't think I could.
Sorry, ma'am.
I couldn't hear you. Please, can you repeat your question?
Yeah, sir. What precaution we should take while doing REXs in a intumescent mature case? Intumescent cataract.
Yes, madam. So intumescent cataract, three important things, madam. One, use a heavy, high molecular weight viscoelastic, heavy viscoelastic like cohesive viscoelastic, and initially put in a uniform layer so that you're flattening out the anterior capsule. Make a very, very small nick to begin with. If there is not much fluid coming out, so if you have access to an ASOCT, you can do an ASOCT initially, which will show whether it is just swollen cortical fibers or there are fluid clefts which are present. Now, when you make an initial, though that is just academic, it's not mandatory. Once you've made the initial nick, if the fluid comes out, you can aspirate some of that fluid, which will enhance your visibility. Then after the fluid has come out, and if there is only hydrated fibers left behind, inject a little bit of viscoelastic. Make sure you're injecting viscoelastic beyond your capsule, that is from the periphery towards the center. If you inject it into the center, if little bit goes into the bag, it will actually end up tearing the rhexis or extension of the rhexis. So inject from periphery towards the center so that it flattens your capsule. And then take a forceps, or if there is sufficient space and sufficient support posteriorly, you can even continue with a cystitome. Make an initial small rhexis. After making a small rhexis, go ahead and do a little bit of aspiration or hydro, gentle hydro, that is anterior hydro, so that you're removing all those hydrated anterior cortical fibers. After that is done, you can go ahead and make a nick with your micro scissors and then use a forceps to complete your rhexis. This I feel is the most consistent way of doing a rhexis in an intumescent cataract.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Most welcome.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, doctor, for the question. In the meantime, sir, for the benefit of the surgeons who have joined a little later, you have given little important points for doing phaco in hard cataracts, starting from the hydrodissection to the IOL centration while doing hydration. So maybe for the benefit of the surgeons, maybe you can you repeat on the points that we need to do?
Sure, I'll just summarize. So of course, there are different ways to approach the surgery. I will highlight some of the points and maybe the positives and negatives of it. So initially, like we discussed, have a sufficiently sized rhexis, definitely not a small rhexis. And if it is a hard cataract combined with a pupil, which is normally I would go ahead and do a phaco in, let's say in a 4.5 millimeter, 4 millimeter pupil. If it's an NS2 cataract, I'm not going to use any device. I'll go ahead with the rhexis and do it. But if it's a hard cataract, I will go ahead and put iris hooks, because its visibility is extremely important, and having a sufficiently sized rhexis is extremely important in hard cataracts. So after that, you can make a rhexis of 5 to 5.5 millimeter. Do gentle multi-quadrant hydro, no forceful hydro. You don't want any fluid trapped behind this dense nucleus, because there is less space in the bag. So gentle multi-quadrant hydro. Ensure you have a very freely rotating, freely mobile nucleus before you go ahead with the surgery. Initially, Yes, you can go ahead and do a direct chop also, but it is more challenging to do with these hard cataracts, especially to break the spine. So you could do a central deep crater. It need not be very long. It can be short, but you need to go deep because you want to occlude very deep. And once you have occluded very deep, you can go ahead and take your chopper towards the rexus margin or just beyond it, towards the edge of the nucleus, and then go ahead and initiate your crack. And generally, as the crack is propagating towards the center, you will see that the periphery opens out first, and then you can separate it deeper and deeper till the central spine breaks. If the central spine is not broken in your primary chop, go ahead, rotate the nucleus 180 degrees, and then go ahead and complete your chop. And it is extremely important that the chop is completed before your central spine is cracked before you proceed with the case. Because if you keep proceeding without the chop happening, then you're generally left with all the central leaflets attached, and it becomes very difficult to remove the nuclear pieces. If such a situation is there, while trying to remove the nucleus, that is when you lead to excessive zonular stress. The entire nucleus is moving around. So it's extremely important that you divide the piece completely and then only proceed with the emulsification. Emulsification, just do it in the center. Go ahead, grab each piece, bring it to the center, and emulsify it in the center only. And if you have a reasonably good machine and a relatively good tip, it goes in with fairly great ease.
Thank you so much, sir. Request all the surgeons to kindly put on your questions or comments before we come to the end of the session. We still have 3 more minutes to go ahead. Maybe for the surgeons, sir, there is this when it comes to floppy iris, sir, floppy iris phaco in floppy iris conditions. Some surgeons insist to prefer to put iris hook below the incision, the main wound, incision, and some surgeons do not prefer to put it down. So which one do you prefer, sir?
No, I definitely like having a iris hook which is below the incision or just adjacent to the incision, so that it is retracting the iris in that place, so that when you take your phacoprobin each time, it doesn't come forward. And another reason for the iris to tent up is if your incision, the placement of your incisions is more corneal. So it's better to have it more posterior, more limbal or near the sclera, because when you're pulling the iris, it's flattened out more peripherally, it doesn't tent up and doesn't come towards your incision. So in that case, if you've placed it correctly, even 4 hooks is sufficient.
Sir, one more question, sir. When it comes to the, this is little on near to the topic, sir. When it comes to the decision making for purchase of the phaco machine, generally this is the surgeons tend to purchase a good phaco machine. So, what are the points that you would suggest to look after when the surgeon has to go for purchasing a new phaco machine?
Excellent question. Very difficult to answer in a single line, because obviously there's a lot of economics which come into play, and at what cost and what bundling and all those things which you have to consider. And frankly, unfortunately, those are the things which we need to consider most before we buy a phaco machine, because once your techniques are appropriate, for a vast majority of cataracts, you will be able to manage extremely well with the Intuitive as you can with the Signature Pro. So it is not just that if you have an Intuitive or a compact, you don't have to feel inferior or that you will not be able to give good outcomes to your patient. You can give excellent outcomes with those machines also with standard techniques. Yes, having a better machine like a Signature Pro enables you to set a little more daring settings, like a higher vacuum, higher aspiration flow rate, at the same time have excellent stability. So I think while you are able to, if you're proceeding with your stepladder of availability of phaco machines, and you have the ability to purchase that machine, then definitely there is no doubt that it does produce a significant advantage in your OR, not just in the fake out time which you are doing, but also in your outcomes, the relative corneal clarity of your cases, even in the harder cataracts, is extremely good with the Signature Pro. But having said that, for a vast majority of regular cases, you will be able to get away with the compact and intuitive and give good results as well. And the ability to have reusable tubings, at least in a country like India, is very, very important. While the West might say that how can you use a reusable tubing, I still think the economics have a significant role. And in places where you're not doing a long list of cataracts every day, it might be just one or two. And rather than leaving the cases to be clubbed in one day, having reusable tubings also gives you the advantage of being able to do it on any day.
Thank you so much, sir, for the informative stuff. I think it's almost time for the end of the session also.
Sure. I think people are also leaving.
Yes, sir. So with this, we come to the end of today's session. It's been a delight to hear from you, sir. Thank you so much for taking time to enlighten us, and thank you all the participating surgeons for your active participation and questions to make this session a successful one. I hope all of you have got your takeaway points from this session. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, Karthik, and thanks everyone at J&J for having me over. It was a real pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for a wonderful talk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Most welcome.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good day, sir.
Thank you so much. Good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Good day.
Thank you.